Good. The webinar has hot. So excited. So excited. Jamie Hopkins, Find Your Freedom. I'm finding mine here. This book is fantastic. Can't wait for you to have a discussion. And as people are getting in here, I should repeat my first question, right? Where Jamie had this fantastic idea that if we had like music, he said, do I have music? Well, I said, if we did have music today, what would be your song? What would be your walkout song? So I'll let
Yeah.
him say it.
Yeah, you need pump up music when you start webinars nowadays and Zooms. I think it's actually a really good idea. I was saying I've started listening to Ronnie James Dio again recently, just about a week ago. I haven't listened to him for a long time. And so for those of you who are not aware of Ronnie James Dio, he was the second singer of Black Sabbath after Ozzy. He had his own band, and actually is probably most well known for like the devil horns thing at pretty much every rock concert in existence now. I'm sure somebody would have figured it out besides him, but he actually kind of made that a thing. And two of the big songs would be Rainbow in the Dark, which was Tina, you mentioned I was a former drummer. That was my ringtone for about a decade. And then Holy Diver is still probably my favorite Ronnie James Dio song. So those two would be one of the two.
I've heard you on Framework talking a lot about like getting together this fintech band. I'm waiting for that to happen. I'm going to be the front row groupie right in the seats.
Yeah, we've been slowly expanding. You know, Daniel Crosby is part of it. Emily Bender, Anna's part of it, and then Robin Crane, who I just found out was like a professional singer and toured for. She has CDs and stuff, albums, and so she might be our new lead singer. So we might have a full band put together now. We might have all the parts that we needed.
Wow, that's so funny. And Melanie Herrera Bridges, I was just saying, like to her, complimenting her, one of her music videos is out. And so she's singing, she's singing, she's got music videos, like really, really cool. It's fascinating. Like we've got all of these people that we see every day, but we don't realize that they have this like background in music, you included. So, hey, everybody, welcome to today's Intentionally Friends Book Club. We are so honored to have the one and only Jamie Hopkins. I'm going to read some housekeeping announcements. You know, we have to do that. But while I'm doing that, just want to give a shout out to everybody in the chat right now. Thanks for attending. Where are y'all from? Coming to you live. So we'd love to know, put it in the chat for us. While you're doing that, I'm going to just, New York City, Indiana, Florida, love it. Hey, Jamie, where are you today?
I'm in outside Philadelphia, so Villanova, Pennsylvania. So on the East Coast today, but I tend to never be in the same spot for 2 days.
Really?
Yeah. Hey, look, we got Conshohocken right there. I see Jennifer. That's good.
Yeah, we got some New Jersey love too. Awesome over there. Normally I would be in nearby Philly with you in King of Prussia, but everyone, we're coming to you live from Barcelona, from Spain. So I'm really excited and great. So let me kind of get into the show. Hilton Head, fantastic. You guys are so wonderful for joining us. This is going to be an action-packed hour. It's going to go by wicked fast. Here we go. But our special guest is Jamie Hopkins. The book, Find Your Freedom, Financial Planning for Life on Purpose with Ron Carson. This is available on Amazon. It's available on Audible. Spoiler alert, Jamie reads, Ron reads. It's their actual voices and all major book outlets. And before I introduce Jamie, you all know me. I'm partner, chief growth officer here at Intentionally, and my colleague Melanie Herrera Bridges is in the background. Let us know if you're having technical issues. You can message us. And a big shout out to our Intentionally CEO and co-founder, Kelly Waltrick, that she was the brainchild of this. We love this idea. You can visit us at intention.ly to learn more. Keep track with these book club updates, everyone. We are in for such a phenomenal treat with Jamie. And these discussions, I think, are the best, like, lifelong learning. We should see one day, maybe we get these CE credits approved here, because this is going to be fascinating. The meeting is being recorded. It will be available to everyone that registered for this event. And questions for Jamie can be sent in their own questions tab. Don't forget, if you ask a question, you are automatically entered to win a $50 electronic gift certificate to Amazon, and you get a free copy of Jamie and Ron's book, Find Your Freedom. If you're an author, send it to us. If you have an idea, send it to us at Book Club at Grow Intentionally. And lastly, we appreciate the courtesy of your time. Understand that today's program is education in nature. We're not offering any specific financial advice, so please consult with your financial advisor. And with that, Jamie, huge welcome to you. I could read your bio. We could go in for a long time. I want to stop talking and we all want to hear from you. But let me just few more seconds on this here. Boy, you have a lot of initials after your name: Esquire, MBA, LLM,
Some of them are up here.
CLU, CHFC, RCP. You are a financial planning advocate, professor, coach, retirement planning nerd. Recently, you were named one of the top 40 financial services professionals under 40 by Investment News. Shout out, liked your stuff on social. That's a huge accomplishment. You're also one of the top 40 young attorneys by the American Bar Association. You bring a unique skill set, passion for educating consumers and advisors on best retirement planning practices in a way that no other person does. I just want to say that. That's the part that I'm adding in. I'm scripting that in. And currently, Jamie, you serve as managing partner Wealth Solutions at Carson Group, and you are also the co-host of the Framework podcast, a very popular Framework award-winning podcast with Ana Trujillo Limon. You live in PA with your beautiful wife and 3 kids. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tina.
How are you feeling?
I'm pretty good today. Yeah, it's you've known a little bit of that. I ebb and flow actually on how I'm feeling the last year and a half, but today's been a good day. And that's, I had some health stuff about a year and a half ago, but today's been a really, I feel good today. So it's a beautiful day out. It's hot, and Baxter's in here too. We didn't mention him, but he does join in a lot of recordings and webinars, as usually when Amazon delivers something, but
Well, shout out to Baxter over there. One of the things that first surprised me about your book, and thanks for showing the love. We will take all the emojis that you guys want to offer us today. One of the first surprising things about your book, Jamie, is the fact that you recorded it in your own voice. Mm-hmm. There is a lot. I think it's 323 pages here. Yeah. This is a huge thing. What was that experience like to record your book in your own words?
Yeah. So, recording, I do a lot of recordings. I listen to none of them because nobody likes listening to their own voice, right? You just don't like it. It's a natural thing. It's not weird. So it's okay if you also don't like listening to your own voice. I thought the interesting part of reading a lot of the book out loud was one, just kind of I would kind of at first was I've read it, but when I read it out loud, am I going to really hate it? And I actually walked away being hey, I'm actually pretty happy with it turned out. There's obviously things when you start reading it, you're oh, I should add this or change this. But it's so far sailed by that point. You can ad lib stuff and add in new stories and things like that, which is fun too. But I started to have the interesting part, and I'll tell this story too, is reading it out loud. I realized that some of the conversations I was going to have post the book coming out, and a lot of them were I'm gonna have to talk to my mom about this story, and there was things that writing them, it didn't have the same emotional connection. And then once I read it out loud, I was oh wow, I'm gonna have other conversations once this is out after I read it. It's really long. I mean, I was in the studio for 2.5 days. It's a long thing. You just have headphones on and you're reading, and looking at a microphone. So it's like being a professional artist without any fame or money that comes after it. So like not like Melanie's music video that sounds really cool, but yeah.
You know what I felt like it was? I felt like you were my coach. Like
Hmm.
as someone that has, right? Like I have both and part like I love to learn through listening, but then I also love to like learn and highlight. Like
Hmm.
there's part of me that's still like very traditional learning, have to have the pen, the highlighter, have to write things. You felt like my coach.
Yeah.
So kudos to you. Those two and a
Well,
half days,
thank you.
Jamie, were well spent.
Yeah. And I'll actually give this feedback to anybody. I saw Jay in here and a couple other people. If you're writing books, I would suggest, like, if you feel up to it, to do the recording yourself. I do think that you get to add tone and parts to your story as you read it that nobody else can add for you. And maybe a professional person's a tiny bit better at it than I am or somebody else. But I do think that, like, you being able to tell your own story, there's something like nice about that instead of hearing somebody else be the voice for my story. I think it's just better.
I feel throughout the book that you and Ron really challenged us emotionally. Like there was so much in this book that's so like not about money, but that is about life. And then eventually it has the genesis of money. Can you talk a little bit about how you and Ron arrived at the genesis of the book? And then I want to kind of get into his intro because I mean, automatically, there's that saying, you had me at hello. And we like, you're just like, pull me in. You pull us in.
Yeah. Well, the genesis of the book, like the background of the book's a little funny because I've written books before and Ron's written books before. And when I got to Carson almost 5 years ago, it was go write a book. And the actual title of that one, we wanted to have it around either The Planning Promise or True Wealth. And we ended up not writing that one, but I wrote half of that book. Like there's still an existing manuscript for half that book. And I've been a professor, coach, academic, in addition, like I'd almost say in a previous life now. I mean, those things influence me, but it's not the work I do anymore. And the first version of it really started to read like a textbook. And I've written 3 textbooks. So it's not super surprising that that skill set started flowing over. Like it was really boring. Really boring. And I just got to the point where I was like, this isn't going to work. So I just scrapped it and we restarted. And it was kind of around the time that Ron had, I just say he's evolved as a leader, and finding, your freedom is a message that not just for the book, but it's something that Carson has embraced from our partners, the advisors that join us, all the way through to our clients. And that's become part of our vernacular, part of our promise to those who come and join us, whether you're an advisor, a stakeholder, or a client, that like our job is to help you find your freedom. And so that just really became core to the firm. So it felt like telling a little bit more of that story on the front half was important. That the whole first half of the book is really not about finance at all. I mean, it is all about, finding what matters to you, ways to improve your life. And then the second half of the book is like, what does financial planning mean to that process? Because we are in the business of financial planning and financial services. So that was trying the ability to tie those two things together, I think, was the real challenge of this, because ultimately, like, to find your freedom doesn't have to be tied to the money part of it. I think it's really hard to achieve it without it, but you could do the first book as a standalone, and it's like, here's how to focus on that. So tying those two things together, I think, was important to both use our own stories, because I think without that, the first version or the first draft I had of this, we really pulled out our stories. Like they weren't in there very much. It was, like, I don't know, I'd just say maybe too sterile, in the sense of like, we didn't share a whole lot, and we didn't put in stories about my mom and dad. And then it didn't connect as well. Like you couldn't bridge those two things, from Go Find Your Freedom to money, without sharing those first money memories, how that's impacted your path and journey. So I think that was an important add. And I know you said like there was a lot of that. I actually think that's maybe one mistake I still had, is I probably should have shared further in some areas and pulled some other things out and gone deeper into that. But that's always the second guessing of anything you build is, what would you do differently? And that's probably one I would have done slightly differently. Again, like one turn removed from it now, a year out. I mean, the book hasn't been out for a year, but from when I kind of finished writing it was right around this time last year.
I would imagine that there's a lot of personal growth that happens as you're writing a book, no matter how many that you've written, and that this was in some ways like your own personal journey. And probably you sharing those stories were at a time when you were a certain person, and now that you've, changed somewhat. I would say that if there's any part of the stories that you want, that you had in the book, that actually you want to expand, you've got a whole audience of participants, people that respect you, admire you, and would love to hear that. I agree with you. It was one of the great things about the book, and a discovery for me, because looking at the cover, and here I'm like, okay, Ron and Jamie, and when we think of you both, these are people in fintech that have achieved enormous amounts of success. I know that every bit of it was earned and intentional from both you and Ron. And that's what I love, is that you take me back. And I asked you, I don't know if you remember this, Jamie, this is getting a little bit off script, and then I want to kind of dig in a little bit more to the book. But I saw you at the Wealthies when you won the Wealthy Award. And I was like, oh my God, like, where does this genesis of achievement and success come from? And you took me back to something that was like, traumatic in your just childhood and growing up. And I would say that both you and Ron shared things that were deeply personal. And I want to just say that we're all in gratitude for you to be able to do that. It takes a huge amount of courage to do that. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you. And speaking of Baxter, he's here. He's actually about to throw up, so that's pretty funny.
Let's talk about
yeah. But I could go to one story. There's one that's been really impactful since I wrote the book. And I did mention that because I did want to talk about it, which was with my mom. And so I shared a lot of my, so you kind of had what you say is a shared experience or journey. But or event. I think the best way to describe it is like we had a event that we went through, and then very different experiences related to that event. And the interesting thing is I didn't have those conversations that much when I was writing the book. There are some things I talked about with my mom as I was writing it. But the interesting part was like when I read it out loud, then realized, wait, my mom's going to read this or hear it. And then how is she going to think about this? How are we going to have this conversation later? Because I talk about in the book, like, I don't like gifting and she loves gifting. And then I'm like putting that out there to the world. And so, the book came out like November. And she read it like the week before Christmas. And she's like, you Scrooge, like but the going back to like my dad passing away was really interesting because her experience around it is, that's not one of her first traumatic life events. It's not her first money memory. And so it was interesting to me to kind of see that, not that it's less traumatic to her, but like formational around her views of money, it was not, because like her view of that was like she's already had those experiences of being a business owner, of growing something, and then of moving on successfully from a traumatic event. And she knew that she could because she had that resiliency built in her life already. And I thought, one, I mean, it's amazing just about my mom in general, like running a construction company, raising kids, doing that as a solo parent is truly amazing. And she's one of my heroes. And I think that's great when people can look up to their parents like that. But I really mean that for my mom. And she's an amazing person. But it was really interesting to go through that and kind of like talk about her experience through that versus my experience. And then I've done it with my sister, Katie, too. And it's just super interesting to see how people can go through the same event and have such different experiences. And then I kind of, took some of that information. It's like, wow, it's so interesting how like the early money memories are so formative. But for my mom, that wasn't one of her first money memories. But like that connection had never really occurred to me, right? That like, oh, she should have had the same traumatic experience I did around money. She didn't, right? Like she had a different perception of money and how she was going to earn and build a company because she had already formed herself as an entrepreneur, and like she had a relationship with money already set. And I found that to be like truly, I mean, it's one of the most fascinating things that's occurred since I've written the book. And it's not in the book, but it was like a direct reaction and learning from writing it and then having these conversations post it coming out.
When I read it and I saw your mother weave throughout the book, I can identify with some themes growing up in a single parent household. And I know like it appears that both of us had strong mothers and do have strong mothers. Question for you. Did I correctly read in the book that she was still working at one
Yeah.
point? Like
She,
recently, like is she still running that construction company
no,
today?
she is. She still runs it today. Yeah. So she is still working.
Wow.
Yeah. She has kept that thing going my entire life and still runs it today. Yeah, I think that for her too, I don't know how many more years she'll do it, but she's kind of like a lot of Americans were like, what does retirement look like financially? And how do you fill your time for entrepreneurs, which is probably a lot of people in this room, is like the prospect of like not having your business is probably a little scary because that's like she's poured so much into that over her life, right? I mean, she's run that I guess for like 30, probably like 35 years now. And it's a really hard thing to let go of, whether you love the business or not. Like it's so ingrained into you, your life, the people you work with, like that's her main community outside of family.
She did a really impressive job with you and your sister. And again, your dad must have been somebody also too really extraordinary because you turn out extraordinary. And there are a lot of aspects to your personality and things that we discover through reading the book. I have a really fun poll that I want to get to that again, a lot of people on this webinar know you, but I was like, oh, wow, I discovered some interesting things. So Jamie's trained under which coach? So would love for you all to take a guess. So far, everybody's getting it right. Oh, okay. I love it. I love it. I love it. Love it. Okay, I'm going to allow you guys a few more minutes. And then, yep, we've got answers all around 40,
There you
20,
go.
40. Yeah, okay, good. Okay, I'm not going to be the spoiler alert on this. This was another fascinating thing. Again, I think it partly goes back to, who you are as a person and how you weave like certain themes in life with finance and with wealth. So who was it, Jamie?
Yeah, Coach Bob Bowman, who's been multiple time Olympic head coach and was mostly known for being Michael Phelps's coach. Also was my coach, which is less well known for, unfortunately. Like everyone would have got it right if it was Michael, but less well known for coaching Jamie Hopkins. But maybe one day I'll get a little closer. But it's so far it's been pretty dominated one side with Michael there. I grew up in Baltimore and swam on the same team as Michael Phelps. A bunch of Olympians, actually. Beth Botsford, Anita Nall were there when I was there. Katie Hoff came. I was pretty old compared to her, but she swam on the team too. And actually, there's a guy, Kalish, who's swimming now, who's super fast. Looks like he's going to win a couple gold medals. He was on the team when I was there too, Chase, and really great guy. I swam really with his older siblings, but he was just a tiny little guy back then. So it's always wonderful to still see. He's probably the last one that I'll know. That everybody else is aged out of the sport at this point. But yeah, grew up swimming under Bob, and Bob's an amazing coach. Probably one of the fun stories about Bob that's also, I try to add things that have come post book, was I had lunch with a financial service coach maybe about a month ago. And they asked me a question nobody's ever asked me before, which was like, what was the difference of swimming under like a multi-time, Olympic head coach versus all the other coaches that you've worked with? And swimming's a little bit different of a sport than some other sports. So like I kind of thought about it also in that term, like what made that so much different. You don't get like the fiery rah rah trying to get the most out of you by yelling at you coaches in that sport as much as you might get, say, in like basketball and football. And I played both of those too, which were a little bit more of just trying to push you that day. Bob's real special gift was he actually looked at kind of what it took to train and develop somebody over like a 10 or 15-year time period. And that's what I, kind of in hindsight, like that's what really made Bob so special as a coach. It wasn't how to get the most out of me that year or the next meet, or, Michael's a better version because most people understand his success level with it. But, when he started coaching Michael Phelps, he didn't think about how do I make Michael the best swimmer I can next week. It was about how do I develop this person over the next 10 to 15 years to take them from a scrawny kid in Baltimore winning, like summer league dual meets to the most successful Olympian of all time. And they started with that view of like, what would it take to be the most successful Olympian of all time? And then kind of work that plan backwards into like, what are you going to do the year before and the year before that? And so he took this really long-term approach through health, mental wellness, training your body, swimming, taking care of yourself so you don't get injured, and really put that entire view together. And that's why, I mean, really, it's why he's been so successful, not just with Michael, but, he's probably trained, 30 Olympic swimmers or something at this point, which is just, from a coach perspective, I mean, he's got to be one of the most successful coaches across any sport and anywhere in the world. It's really amazing.
I can just imagine it that you're as your coaching advisors at Carson, like, some of that is just like, it's just channeled. It's ingrained right now in your DNA. Mark and I took a tour. We were at, being that we're here in Barcelona, we went to the Olympic Stadium and all that. And one of the great things that our guide told us was that all of the things that they built for the Olympics are being utilized right now, which was really fascinating. We saw part of the pool. We didn't see all the pool, but kudos to you. And if I remember also too correctly, that Michael Phelps also too grew up in a single parent household, and like you attributes like a lot of the stuff to his mother, and I think he has a sister too, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Kind of
Hillary and
transitioning.
Whitney. Yeah, he's got
Yeah,
two older
okay.
sisters. Yeah, they all
There
swam
we
with us too.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. That's so fun, Jamie. Well, there are a lot of things within the book. I want to get to chapter 3 because I'm more of like a letters and acronyms than I am a numbers. I'm trying to channel my numbers. We do have some numbers within today's questions, but you talk about this idea of an MTP, and I think it's perfect as we're talking about these modern themes of coaching and Olympians and achievement and Coach Bowman. So, and emotional, like knowing your why. The MTP, can you explain like how it fits into this book and just your overall themes of, us finding our financial freedom?
Yeah, and I'll kind of tie this to a couple different things, right? But that like your massively transformative purpose. And I use purpose is a great word. I use aspirations a lot too in here. But I think it's whatever language kind of reflects to you. Things mean different things to different people. Purpose and aspirations are pretty closely tied together. And it's, what's that thing you want to change in the world? And, it's bigger than goals. And I think that's the main takeaway is that we often in financial planning get very focused on goal-based planning, which I'm a fan of goal-based planning, which I talk about in the book. But goal-based planning is not like deep enough, far enough, than really what matters to people. And what matters is not that like I save $1 million or I sell $1 million worth of stuff or I build a business with 50 people in it. It's the impact that's coming out of that. And that's really more of your purpose or aspirational side. Like you care about those things because if I make $1 million, I've served 100 households that I really care about and put them in a better place. Or that I made $1 million so I can give back to my church or my school or my community and, feed people. Like there's always one thing past the goals. And I think that's a big part of the book is like, one thing is write it down and define it. What you define is what you do. And it also helps us get not super focused on what I'll say is the mile markers, and more focused on what is the ultimate outcome that we care about. Because you can hit a lot of goals along the way, but maybe not feel super satisfied with the outcomes in life. You see that with very successful people that just keep knocking out goal after goal after goal after goal, but they're not going anywhere. They're not moving towards a bigger target. It's just, I want to hit this goal, but like, well, what was the purpose of hitting that goal? Like, why did we care about that goal? And as you ask those questions, kind of like a little kid does, it's like, why? Like, why does that matter? Why does that matter? You tend to get to this better answer of like understanding yourself, understanding the things you care about, the impact you want to have in the world. And that's a really fun exercise. If you haven't done it, it's just kind of like when you ask people about like, well, why do you care about that goal? Or why do you care about money? And then just keep going that to the end until you kind of get to a real answer. Is a really fun exercise. I've done that a couple times on the money one too, which is like, Tina, like, why do you care about money? Oh, so I can buy things. Well, why do you want to buy things? Or why do you want security? And like, you actually take that down to a level where you get a true answer, which is often about family and, impact, and not any of the top line goals you've actually listed out.
And one of the methodologies that I really like, and you present a lot of frameworks throughout the book, depending on what type of exercise or what it is that you're wanting us to do. The PERMA model, you refer to it a lot. I thought like maybe we could just spend a few minutes on the PERMA model and balance wheel, because like you mentioned, it's just not one thing. And I imagine like, how are these tools that advisors can use to have conversations with their own clients? Like, when do we start to go from goal setting to aspirations as we're meeting with clients, in the conference room? Should we? Is that something on day one or meeting one, or is that something like on like meeting 5 or after they've been a client for a certain amount of time? So all these kind of questions were running through my mind as you were presenting these frameworks,
Yeah.
much deeper conversations than probably the conversations that we need to have. Why do you want the money? Why this goal?
Yeah. And so, when you get to like goal setting can be kind of a daunting or really fun exercise. And I'll share a couple things. I know you asked about PERMA, and it's, kind of about aligning emotions and meaning and relationships and accomplishments all into the goal-based world. And it's a model that's been around for a long time. And, different ways to, smart goal setting. And I modified that a couple years ago when I took over coaching as a way that I use it. And it's kind of what works for you. Like, I don't think a lot of things in the book try to say, here's the one way, the only way, but like, here are things that work for people. And so find the ones that work for you and test them. And if you don't like one, guess what? Don't use it. Use a different one. And it's kind of like diets and exercise. Like, not everybody follows the same one. As you find your freedom in life, it's not going to be the same path that everybody took. And it's a little bit, we've interwoven that into the book. Like, Ron and I take different paths. We work at the same place. We work very well together, but we've taken very different paths in life, and will continue to, both along this journey. And, when I look at goal setting, I find goal setting to be like super powerful, right? Like, the things that get measured get done, all of those things. And that's really what goals are about. When for a couple years, I did a lot of goal setting with advisors. It's one of my favorite things to do with advisors, is to set goals with them. And one of the things that I always added into that, though, there's the purpose part. So I'd always start with like, in PERMA, there is a purpose and meaning and emotion side of it. So you start with that. But then I also add this aspect of like actionable items to it. So I always call it smart A planning. And it's like, what action steps can you take this week or next? And if you can't do something in this week or next, I actually don't think it's an appropriate goal. I'm sure some people disagree with that, but I always look at it like, if you can't action on it, it's not a goal yet. Like, if you can't move towards it, it's not a goal. Like, that might be an aspiration, and maybe we need to set a different goal in between where you are now and there. But if you can't action on it today, tomorrow, next week, if you can't put something into play, it's not an appropriate goal. The other one is getting specific enough. I would say that's one of the other biggest mistakes I see around goal setting is It's really broad language, it's undefined, it's not specific enough. And that doesn't mean you can't just change and modify that stuff as you go, but you've got to set specific goals to be able to move forward. And so I think that's really important as part of any exercise, is to understand what's the purpose, right? What's the emotional response? How are we going to measure success? And then what are the action steps we can take to that specific outcome you're aiming for? And that's that doesn't matter if we're talking about financial planning, doesn't matter if we're talking about building a business, it doesn't matter if we're talking about your personal life. I set goals every year, beginning of the year, across 3 different stages. I set what I call, professional goals, which is just what is my impact at Carson going to be right now? I set what I call personal professional goals, which are my development goals. Like, how am I going to develop as a professional? Is it education? Is it leadership? Is it communication? And I set very specific goals. And then I set personal goals too. And those tend to be about my family, about my kids, one of my and I set like a top line one that, like, my focus this year is creating resiliency in my kids. And so then my individual goals underneath of that are very specific to how how I'm trying to drive to that this year. And that was a lot.
I love this question it's fantastic. And, there were parts, again, I see so much of your stories. I love the section on you talking about how your kids pick different charities and different things to belong to. Like, there are just different ways throughout the book that you can, again, how we interact with money and wealth and what we think about. Like you said, it's not one particular thing. I love Linda's question. And I think that it's definitely a harbinger for probably where the industry is going and where it needs to go. So I'll read it. And thank you very much for Linda for the question. We're big fans of Linda Wittich. You're automatically entered to get the $50 Amazon gift card and a copy of Jamie's book. So here's her question. There's been such a shift in financial advisors going towards coaching clients to get to the heart of what they desire. Coaching is a different skill that most people really know. Do you feel that financial advisors should become certified coaches? We love the question.
Yeah, this is a wonderful question. So, Linda, thank you very much for asking it. Uh, I 100% agree on the main 2 statements that were in there, which is coaching is a very different skill set than, I'll just say, investment management or financial planning. I will say that most advisors are in the business of behavior modification, whether you believe it or not. And that is kind of the core. So to some degree, you're always coaching. You're just using different techniques, probably as a financial advisor than a traditional coach might. I do think that there is a model in which financial advice can be delivered alongside coaching. I have less of a strong opinion on, like, the financial coaching that exists by itself. That's a whole market that's developed. To be honest, I don't work in that market a whole lot. Carson's not really in there. I do pay attention to it. I have some concerns about that model standalone, but it's going to exist. It'll, people sell courses and do that work. We have an advisor and that I'm really good friends with named Abby Henderson. She's outside of Boston, and she is fantastic. And her whole team does get certified as coaches. And but they're financial planners, right? They're CFP professionals. They work with clients in a traditional kind of financial planning approach, delivering plans, and they're certified coaches. I have seen like prospect clients come in there and how great of a job. I mean, I think she closes probably higher, gets new clients higher than anybody else I've seen out there. Their growth is tremendous. They're impacting lots of people. They continue to add advisors into that team. And part of it is, I think that message to a client of, like, look, we're a financial planner and a coach together is a really powerful message. I think there's a lot of people out there that resonate towards that. I think as we move to more of a desire for meaning and impact on the consumer world, which look like that movement is happening in the world. People are craving impact. They're craving that, understanding of the, where their money's going, how it's impacting the world, how their decisions financially impact those around them. So that coaching element coming into it's super powerful. I don't know yet that there's a big enough, is there a global movement in the financial advisory world where we're going to see half of advisors be coaches in a couple of years? I don't know that I see that, but that sub market of it is going to grow. I think we will see more and more advisors become certified coaches. So I think that's a great shout out. I think there's a big need for it. And at least from my view, the advisors that we work with at Carson that have gone that route have done extremely well. So there is clearly a impact and client need for it out there.
Yeah, there's another interesting question from Michael Hathaway, is that do prospects and clients have any idea how much they need non-financial retirement planning alongside of planning for the financial aspects of retirement? Again, within your book, within Find Your Freedom, you've got both of those sides, which, I can, which I really, really like, because we, this on page 83, this was planning for all of the decades, the 20s, 30s, all of the things that I wish that I had this book. I said it to you at your book launch party.
Yeah.
I said, where was this book 30 years ago? You can give this book out to your kids, and I'll be giving them, my kids, this book. But, kind of talk about that. I hope I asked that question correctly.
Yeah. So it's kind of I think it's the individual, to individuals, the clients, just like regular people, all of us too, right? We're all potential clients here of advisors.
We
We're all
are.
advisors, right? Yeah. Do we understand the non-financial needs? So what I would say is I think people understand it. I don't think that their expectation is that the financial advice world as it exists today is the solution for that. I think the need and their desire for something more than just investment management, insurance, products, sales, retirement income planning, I think they realize that they need it. I don't think that consumers know where to go with that. I talk about this a lot when I'm doing a more normal presentation. I talk about like the confidence gap or trust gap between consumers, what they expect to get from the advice world and what they get. It's really tremendous. And then if you dive down to like, what do consumers really want from like their financial trusted professional, is like, they do want somebody to talk to. It is not just, I want investments and tax planning and retirement. They expect those things. We're still not delivering that level of what they expect. There's a big miss between what's delivered and what clients expect. So to even get to the next level, which is kind of like a second or third level of trust, we're not delivering on like 1 and 2 well enough to get to the third level. And I'll try to explain that real quick too. I went into another concept I didn't explain. We often talk about 3 dimensions of trust in our industry or profession. Like level 1's just like, don't steal money from clients. We probably do that. Level 2 is like, deliver what we say we're going to deliver and what clients expect to be delivered. We don't do a great job at that. If you look at a lot of the data out there, like they expect, right, estate planning, they expect tax planning inside. A lot of advisors don't deliver it. We do investment management, financial planning well, but as we go through the other areas, we kind of fall off. And then the third level is deliver clients' needs before, like, meet their expectations before they realize they have them. That would be that part of really going to that question, which is, what are the things that we can pull in, like the non-financial side that they know they need, but they don't expect from advisors yet.
So there was you mentioned Marcus Ogden, a former NFL player. He's mentioned in the book, and I look at somebody like him. There was another question that Paul asked along with coaching, this idea, and we keep on coming back to this theme, which is pretty cool. But one of the things that I think that you did well in the book here is by bringing up somebody like a Marcus Ogden and saying, like, doesn't matter how much money you've made, how much you've accumulated, or you could be at the height of your career, but yet you really need someone to help you make really good financial decision making around it. Do you want to talk a little bit about Marcus Ogden? Why, the power of what of his example and how he contributed to the book?
Yeah, and I will I'll try to hit a couple of these questions and that one too. Because I see we're getting lots of questions. This is good. Now we can be done like the agenda was and just go with these things. So this is wonderful. So
Awesome. Love it.
yeah, well, I'll hit Marcus real quick. So Marcus is, I consider Marcus a friend of mine at this point. We've known each other for a while. And, I've appreciated Marcus sharing his story of, struggle. Like he's drafted. His brother, Jonathan Ogden's Hall of Fame, probably the best left tackle ever to play the game. Marcus went into the league about 8 years and, left the league, and unfortunately has one of those stories that a lot of NFL players do. And he played a lot longer than the average NFL player too. And, went bankrupt, all of those things, and had to like restart his career really twice. He even became a financial advisor for a short period of time, rebuilt up a really big company, was making 7 figures, and ended up, kind of, losing that too. And a lot of that he talked about, it's like his own hubris and lack of humility. And he had to kind of like adjust to those. And he's rebranded and kind of, rebuilding a life now too. And he's a coach, and I've worked with him. He does a lot of motivational speaking and works with the NFL again and coaching players about what life is going to be like afterwards. And so he shared a little bit of that story too in here. And he said the same thing, like, Jamie, where were you when I was in the league? And unfortunately, like a lot of those young people coming into professions don't get the advice they need yet today. So that's a tough one. But yeah, we talk a little bit about his story. I've had him on the podcast. He runs his own podcast, Marcus Ogden does, which is a great,
Yeah.
great show out there. I know we probably have some listeners that have checked it out or interacted with him before too. Do you
Yeah.
want
And
to hit
following him
Jay's?
on Twitter is a good thing too.
Yeah.
Following Marcus on Twitter on like a lot of inspirational stuff there.
Do you want to hit Jay's question? I can hit that. We could just start working through some of
Perfect.
these.
Yeah,
If you
let's
want,
get to those. Let's get to those questions. They are lighting up the feed here.
yeah, I got to
Thank
move
you all.
faster. So Jay, Jay also has a podcast and show and TV channel. So Jay, good to see you. Any best practices from advisors successfully using the book in their marketing efforts? Yeah, so I'll give two different versions here. So Carson advisors, we actually allow them to write the foreword to it, which is super cool. Jay, is one of the reasons we designed and built the book the way they do. So Jack Campbell, who a lot of people here might know, a fantastic advisor, Alexander Legacy Wealth. She's got she can put her logo, write the forward, her name goes on the cover. And then they, if you do prospecting events or get dinners together, I've run an event with Jack where we had, I think, like 16 Black women business owner professionals here in Philadelphia. And we had a dinner and we talked about all of those things. Like, I don't think we talked about money at all the entire thing. It was, about, just what does freedom mean to you and what are the challenges you have and interfamily stuff. And it was beautiful. And it allows you to have a deeper conversation sometimes than a like rollover conversation might have. So that's one way Carson's using it. I also think giving it to existing clients that you're doing financial planning on. And that's kind of the second half of the book is like, what should you expect with good financial planning? And it's kind of a way to like codify that and hand it out. So whether you're doing events or one-off or existing clients, that's how a lot of people have used the book. It's actually how people use my other book, Rewirement, too, was they'd hand it out to clients and, hey, like, this is what you should expect from a retirement income plan. I think if you believe in the message of finding your freedom and financial planning as a process, not a deliverable, the book makes a lot of sense, because really what it talks about is the process of planning, not here's exactly what a plan is going to look like for you. So that's a great question. The coaching one, I think, came up twice. I'll hit that one, and then Tina, I'll let you go from there. ICF is the International Coaching Foundation or Federation. They have like two different tiers of coaching accreditation. From a coach world perspective, that's like the biggest one. There's a lot. I mean, there's probably thousands of other credential type coaching things out there after that, but that's kind of the big one. Yeah, I see Linda, you wrote in there too. ICF is the most recognized from a coach world. That's the one we send all of our Carson coaching. We got a team of 13 coaches that coach financial advisors. So if you haven't worked with a coach before, that's always a good place to start. You could reach out, but we kind of go that route first. But then there's a lot of different, and I don't vet all the other ones out there, but that's the main golden standard, if you would say.
So thanks for that. Thanks for the questions. I want to launch a poll, and I want to actually get to one of the questions that I asked towards the end of the book, because there's the financial planner as part of you, and there's also there's the attorney aspect of you. So I make sure that we ladder that into today's conversation. And one of the things that was, a hard chapter for me, I'll say it. Let me launch this Massachusetts study first. And then you guys bear with me for just a second here. Okay. Massachusetts Institute of Technology showed you I would be digging into the number side. Show that 40% of Americans will die with less than, again, a lot of sophisticated, a lot of smart planners and people in the industry listening. This was another statistic that blew my mind. So we'll let it a few more seconds out with that. But yeah, we're gonna get to the question about, you mentioned we think about living well, but we don't think about dying well. So I thought we could talk about, what makes for a good end of life and estate plan. I would think that conversation with a client might be a little awkward, like, dying well. It's a very personal, a hard reflective exercise. I'll admit, it's something that I've thought about, and that is not so easy to do. As far as the poll, Jamie, what is the answer to the MIT study?
Oh, I think it's 10,000. I didn't see
Yeah.
the poll up, but I think it's
Yeah.
10,000 I have it on a slide somewhere too. So I think it's
Yeah.
10,000.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, you're
Okay.
absolutely
That's
right.
good. I
It's
wrote it,
10,000.
study, got it.
Okay. Yeah, we're good. We're good. You passed the test there. But what did you mean by that end of life,
Yeah.
conversation and that estate planning? What's the big takeaway for us here from the attorney aspect of you married with a financial planner?
Yeah, I think one of this side, top left, and that's my trust and estate certificate from Villanova Law. I had the top grade there, so I keep that one up, and reminds me at one point I was good at something. But I went and did estate planning myself for a while. One of the things that I realized was it's very reactionary. I mean, maybe more so reactionary than any other area of planning is people come in when, after an event, they got sick, somebody died in their family, they got married, they're getting divorced, like they're always reactionary to some event. And what I started to realize was that like people aren't planning for a good end of life. And how do I want my last couple years to be? And that gets to the long-term care conversation, but like, not just how am I going to pay for it, but like, where do I want care? What's the type of care I want? Now, we can't control how that end plays out, but we can plan for a good end of life, just like we can life. We as the United States of America are a very death denying and avoiding society. We don't celebrate death and life as much as some other cultures do. Now, there's subcultures in the US and people's families might do it. But like when I go back to my family in the Netherlands, they do much more of a celebration of life than a lot of the other funerals that like my family here does. And again, those are my experiences. So I know other cultures, people here do that differently than I do. But I've kind of found that, especially around Philadelphia, to be generally true. Also working with estates, that it's, we don't plan for it. We don't have those tough conversations. And I think it's super important. I think that some things have changed the last couple of years where we're a little bit more cognizant of death than we were maybe for the decade before. We had kind of a reprieve from it, and it got brought back to the front of our mind through war and COVID. And so I think we're a little bit more aware of it again, a little bit more open to talking about loss. And I think the interesting thing is just all the conversations and stories that flow out of it when you can be open about it, that it kind of invites others to share around it, I think is a really powerful thing. But for advisors, like it's a huge part of our planning and value add to clients and their families is making sure that they're okay in those kinds of trauma and of, kind of finality when it comes to life and death. And the planning though has to continue after that, right? Like the plan doesn't end when somebody dies. I know I talk about that in the book too. It is, like that's not the end. There's something after death. Like the plan continues, and we have to build something that goes through life, but then also past life.
That's a great That's a great explanation about it. You bridge so many themes throughout the book. Community was another big takeaway from the book, and talking about like communities that we belong to, but then communities that we might actually want to walk away from, and ways in which that we're members of communities with not even knowing about it, and you making like, doesn't always have to be a check, doesn't always have to be a financial contribution to a cause that you believe in. Again, so many of these themes here: community, self-actualization, lifelong learning. Like, this book is filled with so many of those themes. But like, what about that community? We had earlier in our discussion, Jamie, we talked about how you're working with your kids and how that's a theme right now, and they're teaching them at a very young age. Again, and our parents did the best job could with us, but there wasn't an easy way to give. Like, we didn't even think of doing that when I didn't even think of doing that when I had my
Yeah.
kids. It wasn't until like, they got in the teenage years, and you're more aware of your surroundings and visits to New York City, and like, all of a sudden you're exposed to maybe different areas and different communities. But, why was that such a big focus of the book?
Yeah, let me hit those. I'll try to hit both of those really quickly. The one technique that I use with my kids is every Christmas we let them pick charities that they give to, instead of giving gifts to their cousins. My kids are 6'5", 4", and so people ask me like, when's it too early to do that? I mean, my 4-year-old's done it twice. He started when he was 2, but he very much understood the concept. And now he picked like the wildlife foundation thing because he liked tigers, but like they immediately gravitated to stuff. My daughter, who I guess she was 4 at the time we started that, picked like the children's hospital, right, St. Jude's, and so she gives money there. They all have a connection with it. Now look, like, does that mean like they're making the most purposeful use of any dollar ever? No, but they know that they give and that we send money to those places and that there's an impact, and they all have a connection to it. And it's been, I didn't create that, somebody else has told me about that, but it's something we've adopted in our house. I think that people's favorite chapter in the book now, like, I don't have a poll of that, of like the 25,000 people or whatever that bought the book so far. But, I do think that that's people's favorite chapter. It's not one of the longest ones that, there was probably some risk that it was never going to make it in the book. But the notion of accidental communities was something that I kind of realized a while ago. And those are the communities we don't pick. Like, you could list your family in accidental communities. You can list some of your work stuff, like, and you just end up in communities that you didn't necessarily seek out to be part of. There are communities that we did seek out to be part of, right? That like we made, like, you joined a fraternity and you joined it on purpose at the time you joined it, and then all of a sudden you're still part of that community 30 years later, and that might have become an accidental community. It might not even be a good community anymore. And I think that's one of the concepts from the community section that people like found a little surprising, is that I really dive into the fact that like community has such a positive connotation, and communities can also be super negative to you. You can be part of a community that is totally not good for your lifestyle, for your health, for any of that. And that we get sucked into accidental communities and we don't challenge our role in communities often enough. That you really do need to take stock of, what role do I play in a community? Who do I want to be in that community? And is this community still healthy for me? And then if it's not healthy and I'm not playing the right role, that you need to affirmatively take charge of that and change your role or leave that community, which can be really hard. And so that's one of the things I kind of challenge in the book, is like, what are our roles in communities? And are these communities that we chose to be part of still, or have we just falling into them because we've been part of them for so long?
Yeah, you include a lot of questions throughout the book. It wasn't just in the community chapter. I remember even seeing it on the employer side, choosing to work somewhere. And then again, I wish I had this years and years ago. Right now, thankfully, I could, check the box in a lot of things. But what's great is that you're very here, ask this question, ask that question, add this question, so that this is like a guide for people who need it. And again, just want to kind of concentrate on one area. So we've got 4 minutes left. I want to just thank you for this. Before I ask my last question, what's the best way? I know that a lot of people are going to want to get in touch with you. What's the best way to get in touch with you, Jamie?
Yeah, look, I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter. My name's just Jamie Hopkins on LinkedIn, so you can find me there. On Twitter, I'm at Retirement Risks. I use Twitter and Twitter less and less, but I am on there. And then my email at Carson's J Hopkins, just the letter J Hopkins at carsongroup.com. And then I did see that there are two other. You want me to hit those two questions
I
quickly?
would love it. Thank
All
you
right.
so much. That would be fantastic.
Steve Martin, great question. When you do that follow-up of why, I'll give you two other tips I use there if people aren't opening up. Look, the reality is sometimes people don't want to open up and they have the right to keep that to themselves. One is you sharing first tends to help people open up. So if you can share about your meaning around it, that can disarm others to share. The second one is like actually ask permission on the front end too. It is instead of trying to get somebody to do something, asking if you have permission to do it. Like, will you give me permission to do this exercise with you? And then all of a sudden, like that helps a lot. It's just getting permission. And then Ricky asked a really, like we don't have enough time. This is an entire 1 hour conversation. But Ricky asked about CFP and conflicts that can still arise. Look, I'm a big fan of the CFP designation from an education standpoint, but having any type of education does not remove all conflicts out in the world. So what I say about that is like, that's a good thing to look for, but it's not the only thing you can look for. It just like an attorney, just because like you went to law school and passed the bar does not mean you're a good attorney. Just because you took the CFP and passed the test does not mean you're a good advisor. So how people are compensated, great question to ask an advisor. Do you have conflicts? What are those conflicts? Do you have proprietary products that you're paid more off of than other products? All of those things are great questions. And what you're typically trying to get to is none of them are necessarily bad, but do they align with the outcome that you're trying to achieve? And so those are great questions to ask. And that's a little bit of kind of like what's underlining, the scenario that you had. And I'm sorry that you had a bad experience and lost money or, it just did not get the outcome you want. And, kind of relied on a designation to some degree to give you that answer. And I wish that was true. I wish that everybody could just say, if I hired a CFP, it's all going to be okay. And unfortunately, today it's not. That the consumer is held kind of to going deeper than that alone. And I wish it wasn't the case. It erodes trust, but it is the case as we exist here today. But it's a great question.
There was a wow factor that I had in the book too, that you said this: if someone can't answer why they're in the profession, they're the wrong person to work with. I was like, bam, that hit. Again, you guys get the book. Jamie, thank you for my signed copy too. Love it. Find your freedom. This is fantastic. I think it's also too a great way to just, bridge conversations, share with your clients and share with your kids. Jamie Hopkins, thank you for illuminating our minds today, passing along knowledge. I know that we're all better for it, myself included. Thank you. We appreciate you so much. Good luck to you and Carson Group and Ron. And thank you for the insights and for you today, for the gift of you.
Thanks, everyone.
Everyone, take care.